Every single week, we got to get one little comment before we turn the cameras on from Crisis. Hello, everybody. We are back with another week here in the DCU Experience. This is an exciting week. We're not going to spend much time here on the preamble, but we would like to say if you'd like to leave a super chat at any time during the live stream, we will answer any questions or comments that you have. If that is left in the form of a super like. This podcast is also sponsored by GamerSupps. If you'd like to save 10% on your next order, head to gamersupps.gg/key issues to save 10%. So we are here with everybody. The whole crew is back. Crisis, Nick, True, and myself. And like I said, we've got a lot to get into, so we're just going to hop right into it. This week, I don't even know what it was at, to be honest. Maybe bad preparation on our part, but I don't think it matters too much. But Peter Safran and James Gunn were answering a lot of questions from a lot of different people. And we've got probably the most information about the DCU that we've gotten since it was first announced with the Gods and Monsters video that James Gunn had put out. When we all found out together that this thing was going to happen, we were going to get Superman, we were going to get all of these awesome things. And they just basically gave us an update on everything, plus some new stuff that had been rumored and stuff we haven't even heard about yet. So this is going to be a part one of a two-part podcast. We'll be back live tomorrow, but today we're going to talk about everything that was announced and talked about that concerns live action. Tomorrow we'll talk about all the animated stuff, plus the huge Wonder Woman news that also came in the wake of all of these announcements, which in our last episode, we talked all about Wonder Woman. We were really excited for it, and it's gone now. But we'll get to that tomorrow. So, gentlemen, today we're talking about the DCU, the future of it, and like I said, there's a lot to talk about. Peter Safran and James Gunn announced that they are planning to do 2 live-action movies, 1 animated movie, 2 live-action series, and 2 animated series per year. So that's 2 movies, at least in the theaters. I don't know about the animated movie, they didn't specify. And then 2 series and 2 other animated series that are going to be on HBO Max. Do we feel like that's too much? Is that the sweet spot? Is that the perfect amount? Like, I like the number.
I have no problems with the movies. 3 movies over the year seems pretty reasonable. But 4 shows, 2 animated and then 2 live action shows. I understand that Warner Bros. Is a big company and they're putting a lot of behind this, but are we going to be able to keep up the same quality of either animation for the animated shows or things like set design, CGI that they'll probably have to use in some of these shows? Are we going to be able to keep this up for multiple years? Or are we going to start working people to the bone? If it was about maybe 2 animated series and 1 live action series a year, maybe that seems a little bit more reasonable, but it seems like quite a lot of content, right?
I think the bigger issue for me is that we seem to be at a point in time where superhero fatigue seems to have set in. A lot of, this is the same thing I kind of talked about the other week, is if you're a person that grew up on the MCU and you started watching stuff in 2008, let's say you were 10, you're pushing your 30s right now, you might be out there looking for something that just is not necessarily superhero content. It's been so saturated in the market in the last couple of years. Having 6+ projects or more a year, that's not a lot of break, especially when you got to consider that Marvel's out there doing their things too, and they're not necessarily, I mean, they've scaled back a bit, but they're not going, yeah, we're only going to do 1 movie and 1 show. Like, there's going to be a lot of content out there. So you're fighting for viewers' attention that seems to be like telling you right now that they're looking for quality over quantity. So hopefully, the quality is there, because if it isn't, it doesn't matter how much stuff you put out.
I was looking while y'all were talking at the MCU Phase 4 slate to see like how do those numbers line up. And it looks like in 2021 they had WandaVision, Loki Season 1, Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I believe What If Season 1 as well. That might have been... No, that should be 2021 as well. So that's 4 shows right there, 3 live action and 1 animated. And so I definitely think to hit the ground running with comparable numbers as well. That's something that Marvel obviously did not do in Phase 1. All of their TV shows, which I believe the first one was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that took them until after the first Avengers to get up and running. So definitely, I think to come out of the gate with that many is shocking. To try to, in their Phase 1, as it were, try to match the later phases of the MCU. Um, I feel like that's a daunting task, but I think what Nick said about superhero fatigue, Gunn's on record saying that that's not really a thing. He doesn't necessarily prescribe to the idea or subscribe to the idea that it's inherently superhero movies that people have gotten sick of, just bad ones. Um, so it's yet to be seen if that's true. I definitely think if this will probably prove that theory correct or false, the idea of superhero fatigue, because not only are we going to have that many from DC, but likely similar numbers from Marvel around that time. So, you know,
And you know what else? You know what else is we haven't even really considered the fact that we still have Sony out there in the lab
mm,
making whatever dog shit stuff they're going to come up with. Like, I know that they said recently that they're planning, on pausing making additional films, but
the
Warner
Spider-Man
Brothers,
Noir show, that's still happening.
yeah,
And
and
Invincible is going to be ongoing as well.
Sony and Warner Brothers are very similar in the fact that, like, from a top down, they just seem to chase whatever bag they think is the easiest one to get. And right now, it's superhero stuff, and they're pumping all their resources into that. And the second that the Venom and Craven and Madam Webs of the superhero cinema world started to produce, financial flops, they took a step back and were like, now they're like, oh, I don't know, maybe we make another Lord of the Rings movie or something. Like, they just don't seem to have an overall plan for a lot of the way that Sony and WB handle their intellectual properties. So that's one of the great reasons you have somebody like Peter Safran and James Gunn in there that are directing this. You just wonder if it's way too much content before we've gotten anything really. We got Creature Commandos, which kind of, to all of our points, kind of felt a bit half finished, and then other there.
Yeah. I do kind of agree with what James Gunn had said. I think it is an issue of people not wanting to see bad things. I don't think there's an oversaturation of necessarily superhero content. And then Peter Safran also gets into a similar sort of point when he talks about, well, we're going to be working in a multitude of genres as well. We're going to have a whole gambit of emotions and tones that we're going to be able to hit that aren't just going to be the same standard stuff that we've seen from other things and other universes like the MCU or even The Boys or Invincible, which are a little bit more mature, but kind of one note for the most part, like sort of gross out humor. We haven't really delved into a lot of different genres, which is what we've talked about before on this podcast. Something we're the most excited for in the DCU is the ability to greenlight all of these projects that are going to be very, very different from each other, from either a crime series that will be Green Lanterns to Clayface, which is going to be a body horror drama film, to Superman, which is going to be your more standard superhero fare. So I don't think we're going to run into too much of an issue there. I also think they're going to have the benefit of not all of this is going to be DCU canon. It's going to be DC Studio stuff, and that's what they're specifically talking about. So if we get 2 live action movies a year, let's say one is Supergirl, for example, and the other is the Batman Part 2, right? Those aren't both DCU movies. They're going to have wildly different tones. And then you go to the TV series side, you're going to have kids' cartoons, which adults aren't going to watch. That's probably included in that, as well as anime type stuff with My Adventures of Superman. And then you have Creature Commandos, which is DCU stuff. So not only is it spanning genres, it's spanning literal age ranges and intended audiences. It's not all going to be in the DCU. It's just all DC Studio stuff. So I think that it sounds like a lot, but then when you break it down, I think what James Gunn said, we're going to try and focus on making really good movies and stuff. And then also what Peter Safran said, where it's going to be, we're going to have a wide net here. So not even everything is required viewing, which James also said. You're going to get Easter eggs. It's not like the MCU where you're not going to understand the new Captain America if you didn't watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Avengers Endgame, every other Captain America movie, plus a whole bunch of others, plus Incredible Hulk, right? So that's something they're trying to avoid. And we'll see how that works, because all of this is going to culminate in what they call an Avengers Endgame sort of thing here in 6 years. So is all of that story going to be built up properly without everything being required viewing?
Yeah, I just don't see from the public zeitgeist, outside of the MCU movies, which are not good, or the Sony ones that are not good, other good pieces of superhero content, Marvel Rivals being the chief example. People were very excited for Marvel Rivals. And a large portion of it was, obviously it was a good game, but the Marvel characters, people doing art, people like really like these characters. So I don't think there's any sort of fatigue at this point if the content is good. So that would be, I think, the most reasonable take on it. But we also won't get to see how different these shows are actually going to be, because everything we have so far is kind of gun coded, right? We'll have Superman, we'll have Creature Commandos, Peacemaker. These are all gun shows, which has his very distinct style. We like the style, so I'm going to enjoy all these shows. And then I'm not sure about Supergirl. Is Supergirl going to be drastically more different tone-wise? Is that going to be the very first test to see if they can create multiple shows that are distinctly different tones? Because Tom King does not write like James Gunn whatsoever.
Yeah,
they
not
are
at all. Yeah.
basically opposites. So if he has a heavy influence on that show, on that movie, then we can say, okay, this experiment that they're doing is going to work, right? And then that's I think a lot of it is hopes and dreams until Supergirl comes out and maybe see, oh, this is not a gun movie. This is a whoever that ends up directing a movie, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm not too worried right now about the fatigue thing. The thing I'd be worried about is what you sort of alluded to at the beginning, True, is are we going to stretch our resources too thin? Our screenwriters, James Gunn himself, which is going to be overlooking everything, our producers, our animators. Let's make sure that we have like a bunch of animation studios that we can keep fed and busy. That way we have stuff rotating and we don't have the quote unquote invincible problem where we have like an amazing looking season 1 and then after that things sort of like drastically fall off to a noticeable point. Like we want to pump things out regularly, but we need to have things spread out enough between a bunch of different studios that are all working for DC Studios to make a finished, polished product, because that's what I want to see.
On a last quick note on that as well, I'm not sure how you guys feel, because I also don't want there to be content 100%, 365 days of the year. I'll engage with something for a little bit. I'm like, okay, let me take a little bit of a break from it and then come back. But if we have, we'll have the build up to the movie will release, and then, we'll have the conversations after that into a show, which will be weekly, and then there'll be the conversation after that. Is there going to be any point of downtime that people can kind of disengage with the verse, especially for somebody like people like us who are going to be there for every piece of media? Other people who might, maybe they don't care about Swamp Thing, for example, which you should. When the show eventually comes out.
Don't even say it. Unreal.
When the show comes out, Nick,
hurts me to hear you even think it.
Yeah. I think that's a valid concern, but like I mentioned before, I don't think everything is going to be required viewing, and not everything is part of the DCU again. So we have like the Green Lantern show, which is going to be part of the Superman animated series, and then we have kids cartoons, which I don't know if those are going to be canon or not. Maybe they are. I would hope that they're not, so I don't have to watch kids cartoons. Obviously I don't mind watching like a family friendly cartoon or whatever, but like if it's actually for babies, then I don't really want to watch it. Like Mickey Mouse House or whatever. I don't. It does have a banger theme song, but after the theme song, I tune out.
But what if all the best scaling is in those kids
Then
shows?
I'll have to watch and enjoy every single second.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So yeah, I mean, I'm excited for that. What do you guys think about the idea of, okay, we are going to finish up here with a MCU style Avengers Endgame like Justice League sort of event? Is that something you definitely wanted to see? I mean, for me, it's a hard yes. But the lead up to it is going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be very, very different, and I'm really curious how that ends up happening. I know that James Gunn said that everything's not going to be required viewing, but I think that's like a dubious claim at best, because even like Creature Commandos, you can pick up Creature Commandos, but I feel like you kind of had to watch the Suicide Squad to get the most out of it. You didn't need to understand it. But I think you definitely needed to if you wanted to enjoy the product to its fullest.
Well, I think that we live in a world where like it's kind of expected. Like, why are we doing this whole interconnected world at all if we're not leading towards some type of convergence where there are big bombastic events? Like, that's the entire point. And I think that's kind of where comics oftentimes kind of forgets the plot a lot of the time. They will do a crossover event that feels like it could have been something staged in one character's book when it doesn't need to be. We just have to make sure that, and I'm sure that the teams are diligently working towards this, that whatever they're working towards feels like it's necessary, because unlike the Avengers where you got Hulk and Thor who are like the big strong guys, and then everybody else is kind of, at least in the first iteration, was kind of or more or less
redundant.
Not yeah, they're not really as big a powerhouses as them, as having Superman, Wonder Woman, some of these characters that we're seeing them announce, like Swamp Thing is such a massive leap. I don't think that Swamp Thing is going to show up in a Justice League movie, but and who even knows if that's what they culminate in as a Justice League film? Maybe they culminate in some type of a Crisis event, or oh wait, we have Crisis on here, but they culminate in some type of event. I don't want them to kind of feel like they have to do the team up movie just to have the team up movie, but whatever they do has to make sense. So
DC is kind of the house of events, right? You could say Marvel has events and everything, but when you think comic book events, it's almost all DC. You can give Marvel Civil War, and then
House of M.
But it's okay. But as I was saying, obviously, I think when they initially said, what was its phase, like Arc 1 or Phase 1, Gods and Monsters, I assumed it was going to be all these little threads leading into the eventual culmination of the story. Maybe different people have different parts of the story. It is a weird thing to say. You don't need the previous readings to understand the event. That seems like, does that then just mean the event doesn't take into account things that happened before? Or is it more like you can read the Lords of the Rings and get full enjoyment without really understanding what happened in the Silmarillion or the Hobbits?
Yeah.
Right? Is it more of a case of that added history adds a lot more because you understand what these characters have actually gone through versus you're just watching and you're completely confused? Because then that's going to take a lot of writing chops to be able to write a big event movie. Most of the characters I assume that will be in the movie will be known. Superman, people will know who he is. Batman, Wonder Woman, people know. But then when you add Blue Beetle or maybe even a Swamp Thing, Swamp Thing's easy to explain. He's a green
He's
guy.
A swamp Thing.
Yeah,
Thing
it's not very hard.
He's hanging out in a swamp, man. What's
But
there to
like,
get? He's the Lorax of the DC universe. He's speaking to the trees.
The Guardian of the Forest. Yeah. So I'm worried a little bit with that take, but we just don't know what they're setting up yet. Because I feel like by the time we'll get to the movie, we'll know what that's going to be about, right? Whether it's going to be a Green Lantern event, whether it's be a Crisis event, which might be a little bit early for a Crisis event.
Yeah, I don't think there should be one at all. Like a Crisis, I don't think there should be one for ever until like they end the universe, in my opinion. We had, we got that on the CW, yada yada yada. I don't want any more. Like, I'm good on that. Like, just do some big threat that's not necessarily Thanos, but similar enough, or a team like do the Injustice League, do the Crime Syndicate. I want something similar but different, that people can, the multiverse shit is enough on that. I guess like Crime Syndicate is multiverse stuff, but you get what I mean.
Well,
yeah, I think it's that idea of something not being required viewing is I recently just did a big MCU rewatch and paying attention especially to the Guardians trilogy, and then just as you guys are talking, hypothetically thinking like, what if I hadn't seen Guardians 1 and watching Guardians 2, or Guardians 1 and 2 and watching 3? Or even I think maybe a better comparison is Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing while they were talking. Yeah.
Of course, most people in the world have seen those two movies, but with Guardians 3 especially, they do a well enough job of catching you up when it comes to Gamora especially. Of course, there's that scene in the hallway where Peter Quill just summarizes Infinity War and Endgame from his point of view. So I think it could easily be, things like that. And again, looking at the MCU from, phase 1, do you really need to have seen Iron Man 2 to get the most out of Avengers, the first Avengers movie? Maybe the most out of, but I feel like that's a distinction you have to draw is, can I understand and enjoy this thing versus am I getting the most out of it? And I feel like obviously if you watch everything, you're going to get the most out of it inherently, because in the case of Hal Jordan, when he shows up in the Justice League movie, we're going to have, his character arc in mind from the show, for instance, right?
Yeah.
If he shows up and somebody's like, well, that's Hal Jordan, the greatest Green Lantern in the universe, we're going to have lore and we're going to see that have played out. Especially since, and I just remembered this, but that Green Lantern show it's supposed to set up, I think the little brief summary we got of it from when it was first announced is it's going to something or other create a thread that leads to some ancient evil or something that is being unearthed. So I think that's an instance of that's going to be set up. Will it be set up for a Green Lantern movie? Will it be a setup for the inevitable Justice League, or whatever they're going to call it, whatever team they're going to unite? I think that's the question. But I think realistically, there's no way that you can unite these characters and say nothing will be lost if you haven't seen their prior adventures.
I agree.
There's no way that you can do that. So I think it probably is like, when SpongeBob the ice cream truck is about to fall on his head, he goes, no wait, and then it stops. I think James Gunn is looking at the inevitable, like, oh, so I have to do homework, and he's like, no, you don't have to do that. They're going to nip that in the bud immediately, because I think with the MCU, they kind of created a problem where nerds love homework. We all grew up loving to read the tie-ins. The reason why we make these like lore breakdown videos because we like to read everything, Yeah. We like to see, when did this character first appear? And so when that was the target audience of the MCU, nerds who have been reading this stuff forever or watching it in form of the cartoons, once they got on board, that was almost like it was a plus. It was a pro for the movies. Mm-hmm. But as the audiences expanded, and it became more of the like, no hate to the I'm going to get the big gulp extra large popcorn with steaming butter. But once that became almost the target audience for the MCU, those guys don't like homework.
Right.
And so I feel like James Gunn,
but they like our channels because we do the homework for them, right?
Exactly. So really what James Gunn should have said is, you guys don't have to do any homework if you watch these select YouTube channels, which I fully endorse. That would have been great. But yeah, I feel like I feel like that's kind of where I land on it, and just sort of my prognosis. And that's a lot to do with, James Gunn has been in the MCU since, was Guardians 1 Phase 2? That
Yeah,
was like
phase two.
just
Yep.
right.
Like the beginning
So
of it, I think.
that came out like just prior to Age of Ultron, because that's where they established the Infinity Stones. So he's seen all of these, weaknesses, or pros becoming cons. So I think he's going to build his universe on that bedrock. But I think hopefully the catch-22 is, we don't want disposable shows. Like Agents of Shield is a perfect example where they're like, you
Yeah.
have to watch it to get the full story, but you don't, and then it becomes an
You
alternate
have to watch like
timeline.
one episode where Nick Fury shows up and is like, "Here's your helicarrier," or
Right.
yeah, or Agent
We don't
Coulson
want
does that, yeah.
superficially connected shows.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also a landmine that they might step on, is like, okay, the Green Lantern show sets up a villain that's like one of Darkseid's henchmen, and it's like, okay, like
I just want it to feel
Wait a
like
minute.
it's
We've been down
living
this
and,
road
and
before.
breathing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like it's an actual world where like things are happening and not just a vehicle for references. Which
Yeah.
I think the MCU is like kind of at that point, and I don't mind watching everything because I like to watch it anyway, right? So I'm not going into Brave New World being like, oh, I have to watch Hulk. Like Hulk's cool, so I'll watch Hulk. But yeah, I get what they're saying. I think Infinity War and Endgame probably did it the best. Like you could watch both of those movies not having seen any of the other ones, and I think you would be fine. Maybe you would be like, what is up with Spider-Man and Iron Man? That might be like your only hang up. But like everything else I think is fine. Like they explained it all well enough from that point of view. But let's get into some of the actual projects that they talked about. There's a bunch of stuff that was sort of like bad news coming out of the DCU. And it's interesting to see their philosophy, because when they announced Gods and Monsters, they announced all these projects, and we figured like, hey, they're gonna happen. And James Gunn had famously said like a couple times, like, we don't greenlight anything until a script is done and in our hands, right? And that was obviously not the case when they first announced it, because they announced a bunch of shit that don't have scripts. So I think moving forward, that's probably what he's going to do. But just to rapid fire these off real quick, the series that and movies that are having issues, Waller has had a lot of problems. It was supposed to come out before Peacemaker Season 2, but Peacemaker Season 2 is like done filming now, so they've had to retool that script entirely. Booster Gold had a showrunner who was interested, lost interest. That's out. The Authority, they've had a hard time with the script just because of the boys, and they feel like they don't really know how to operate this group in a world where the boys exists, and they don't want it to be too samey. It's been hard, and they've sort of they basically said it's not a priority at this point. James Mangold's Swamp Thing, which we were really, really excited for, has apparently cooled, quote unquote. James said they talk about it occasionally. I think they probably rarely ever talk about it, and he's just being nice. But yeah, that's those.
I don't understand.
Those.
How is it so hard to do this? We're taking a detour, okay?
Okay, go ahead. I mean, those are the projects that are having trouble, so we can dig into
like
those.
The Authority. I get the Authority is not a household name. It is a very relatively niche comic book from the '90s that has seen a bit of a resurgence in popularity since the original announcement. But in terms of like Swamp Thing is inarguably the most popular of like the Dark Avengers, probably. I'd say him and Constantine are probably neck and neck. Or I said Dark Avengers.
We
I
were just gonna let you
Dark.
We know what
you're Sorry. Yeah, but it's the trauma that I'm unpacking live on stream that allows me to make these mistakes. But the show that took place on the DC Universe app, that when it came out was fine when it was being released, but putting what interests me about this, and this is the big problem that I have that I'll address tomorrow as well, is that Warner Brothers has a massive issue with announcing shit. They can't stop announcing things. They love it. They love announcing things more than they love making things. They're constantly announcing projects, constantly telling us that stuff is coming, and then they'll be like, it's actually not coming. Why did you put out a Wonder Woman like CGI cinematic trailer for a video game that was potentially 7-8
Okay,
years
hold
away
on,
from
hold on.
seeing
We'll
the
get
light
to
of
that
day?
in part
Hold on.
2.
No, we'll get to it now. And
Nah.
because it ties into what I'm talking about with Swamp Thing. You're announcing a director being attached to this thing. You're announcing a project as your tent pole. Like these are your mainstream focuses, and then you're like, I don't know, we'll figure it out later. But like you're saying in interviews now that you've cooled on it, you're not that interested in this thing. Yeah, I'm emotionally invested because I really like Swamp Thing as a character, but it kind of sucks to like you're like dangling the carrot in front of us that we're never going to get. It seems like this stuff happens all the time. Like they did this with other, they've done it with entire films at this point where they shot whole movies and they're just like, throw them in the vault. We'll take the tax write-off. Like, then stop announcing stuff. Stop telling people that you're going to do something until you're ready to do it. It's frustrating for fans.
I think this is, I mean, I agree with you, but I think this is a little bit of a different situation based on the interviews. It's not like James Gunn and Peter Safran don't want to make Swamp Thing and have Swamp Thing come out. It's more of a James Mangold was interested in doing this project, so we announced it and we had him pumped to do it, and he got busy doing A Complete Unknown, and he's working on a Star Wars movie, and it's just gonna have to wait a little bit for it to come out, type thing. And maybe it never comes out, but I don't think it's necessarily like on
how many
James
shows
Gunn
and projects. This is, again, WB, prime example here. How many great WB projects are going to suffer at the hands of some director getting a shot at Star Wars? First, it was Game of Thrones. We lost the group from Game of Thrones to Star Wars. Now we're losing James Mangold. I'm just saying, Marvel Disney,
lost Taika Waititi.
Star Wars. Oh no! Oh god! The guy that made
he was
made the worst 2 Thor movies.
He was out to lunch when he wrote that second script. He was like, "I got Star Wars on the way. Let me just turn something, man."
Yeah, whatever. Put Christian Bale in there. He hasn't made anything in a while.
But I also
don't know, like, good.
No, I was gonna say I understand for certain things. The Authority I completely get. It's a very like weird thing to try to make, especially if you're not trying to make it The Boys 2.0. How are you struggling with Waller and Swamp Thing? I don't understand that, because Waller is already an established character. You have an actor for her. Did you not have a plot point that you wanted to do? Was this not going to be a backstory? Was this not going to be her running a different team? How are you having trouble with the scripts like that? Like, we've already established she has a daughter as well. So like, so much of the legwork is already done. So I don't know how that show ever ended up falling through in any way. And then with Swamp Thing, unless you want to connect him to the greater verse, right? Unless you're trying to make, the enemy's the red or whatever, and he's the green. Do you not just do Alan Moore's Swamp Thing as a show? Do you not just do his backstory? I don't.
I mean, that's a great point. Like, they've said multiple times that the overall vision is not necessarily to have everything, just like the MCU, where everything is part of this delicate web of lore. You can have Swamp Thing exist in his own corner of the universe, just like you plan on having with some of this other stuff. Like John Cena's Peacemaker is not showing up in a Justice League movie, probably, if I had to guess. Maybe he will, but chances are he's probably not. And like, if you want to slowly and methodically build up a Justice League Dark type event somewhere down the road, you can, but just because you have the toys don't mean you have to play with every single action figure at the same time. Go put Swamp Thing in his own movie. I'm not saying which run of comic books you could base it off, but I mean, both the legendary Alan Moore run, which is probably what everybody would like to see things from there adapted, or even the modern stuff from New 52, or even Ram V's newest stuff is great. There's a lot of different options that you have out there for a character that is unique and would, I think, breaks the mold of typical, like, what we have come to refer to as cape shit. like superhero stuff. Like Swamp Thing has no problem just ripping a dude in half and being done with it, kind of a thing. You can make it a horror film. You can make it an R-rated picture, and that's something that cinema, comic book cinema, or superhero cinema, whatever you want to refer to it, desperately needs. We need variety. The same people that grew up in 2008 when they were 9 years old, going to the cinema to watch Iron Man, are 30. They want to see the boundaries pushed in this genre. They don't necessarily need everything to be PG-13 anymore. You can make a horror movie. You can make a psychological thriller. You can make something that explores a little bit of depth in messaging that's there.
I mean, I don't disagree with you guys, but again,
I'm just ranting. I'm just ranting.
Yeah, but you're like ranting into the void about like Swamp Thing could be this great, and they want it to be a great thing. He's just the guy's busy. That's gonna make the show, and he can't do it right now.
What is more important than Swamp Thing?
Star Wars.
That's a great question.
Star Wars.
And he has
he
just finished A Great Unknown, which is obviously a Bob Dylan biopic.
Nobody
no
knows.
offense. Probably a little more important than Swamp Thing, in my opinion. But
Bob Dylan more important than Swamp. I gotta go.
What was the last time he released an album?
You're right.
When's
Bob
the
Dylan
last
fell
time
off.
he's been in a Justice League book? When has Bob Dylan saved the world?
That's your boy.
I think
Timothy Chalamet could be
biggest-
Swamp Thing.
I think my biggest problem with the thing is not specific to Swamp Thing, but just so many announcements and the way that I almost feel like it was some WB executive that made James do that announcement where he's like, here's the next 10 things, because as a filmmaker, he has to know that not all of these things are going to come out in the same shape or form that, you know, you're pitching or you're putting out there. And he has to know that how hard it is to wrangle that many directors and writers. And so as these announcements come out, and as things like this, for whatever reason, whether it's as catastrophic as Nick wants it to believe, or as maybe just as practical as you know, Garrick thinks.
I'm on the right side of history here, folks.
This guy just is busy.
Wait till tomorrow.
Whether or not either of them are right or not, it is exhausting to me, and it will continue to be exhausting until we get Superman, because all of these things are up in the air, and I see Nick's point where you get emotionally attached to any one number of these things. For me, I'm looking forward to Teen Titans the most. I would love for that to be a giant successful movie.
Yeah, if that gets canceled tomorrow, I'm going to be on here giving the same exact rant that Nick just gave, and I will expect no pushback on it. Thank you.
If he says we're going cold,
well, they're probably busy making stuff. Shut up.
I'm definitely giving all the arguments you just gave, Garrick.
We're going cold on Titans. That's it. But I'm
going cold on the podcast then.
I think with Superman, because Creature Commandos, technically, we are in the new era. We're past what was. We're in the DCU currently. But an animated series, they put out, you know, a multitude of those under every single Warner Brothers regime. We got Adventures of Superman. You know, that was a fun show. People enjoyed that. Doesn't change the landscape. It doesn't until Superman is out and we get the ball rolling. And I feel like once that's a success, it's going to be a lot easier to pitch shows or to wrangle filmmakers from their other projects, because they're like, I could do an obscure Bob Dylan biopic, or I could do something that plays in this same space, and I might get residuals from a Justice League movie if Swamp Thing, you know, saves the day or appears. He would save the day, of course. He'll merge with Superman, and you know, he'll have a plant S symbol, Swamp Man.
Yep,
exactly. Yeah, so that's how I feel about, because I'm not emotionally attached to Swamp Thing. It's not as tragic as it is for Nick, but I
on it a bit.
It's just cool, guys.
Better than global warming, if you think about it.
Yeah, it's just true.
It's what Swamp Thing would want.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Sergeant Rock. This is a weird one. Sergeant Rock, famously pal and buddy of the Tin Man. there's a lot of things been swirling around this movie that had never officially been announced, right? All right,
Yeah.
here we go. We know who it's going to be directed by. Luca I messed it up. Guadagnino. Got it on the second try. We know that he is directing it, and there were rumors that Daniel Craig was going to be the star, and he had basically been offered the role as he had worked with Luca before on the movie Queer. However, James Gunn said, well, one, we never even announced this thing, and two, we never even said that Daniel Craig was going to be offered the role, and we never made a formal offer to him. We were considering him among many other people to be in this role. So it's just interesting that he's directing that not directing that, but addressing that head on. But there are more rumors now that like Jeremy Allen White might star in it, who was in The Bear and Iron Claw. You might know him. I think Jeremy Allen White is a top talent that DC should look to get as soon as possible before Marvel gets him. If they want him, he could play any number of characters. Now that the DCU is just starting, you have your pick of the litter, my friend. There's so many good characters that you could be, whereas over there, Marvel, they're running out of good ones. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Who gonna play Quasar? No thanks.
Sergeant Rock.
over here.
Sergeant Rock is one of those that I personally would be super excited for, especially if they did, because I've been watching Band of Brothers recently, which apparently is, and I mean, I'm enjoying it a lot, but HBO show follows this troop of real world World War II paratroopers from there.
Garrick is now explaining the plot of Band of Brothers, one of the most critically
Okay,
acclaimed.
I'll tell you
well-known
right now,
World War
how many
II
people are
shows in
watching?
history.
How many people are watching this right now live? I don't know.
Does that
I
have
can
anything
guarantee...
to do? Does that have anything to do with Alec Holland, former scientist turned Swamp Thing hero of the Green?
It doesn't, but I'm getting to Sergeant Rock. I'll tell you right
well,
now.
me, Nick, and True we're passing out
and
here.
probably Crisis don't know what Band of Brothers is about. Okay, and I can tell you for certain our chat doesn't have a damn clue. Okay, so Band of Brothers, no, it's a World War II show. Follows real. It's good. Okay, I'm just saying, I like war movies and war TV shows, especially World War II, World War I stuff. Obviously, that's the most popular, and then Vietnam is in there as well. I'm not a big fan of like the Iraq War movies, to be honest with you. I like the ones where obviously painted as like the bad guys, and then all the guys that are involved in it are just tragically don't want to be there, and it's fucked up, which is Vietnam. And then you have World War II, where we're like, hey, we're the good guys, right? So those are the two good ones. But anyway, I like war stuff. I think Sergeant Rock could be like legitimately a really good place to have a like legitimate war story from World War II. Be set in the
I do
DCU
too. I think,
and put a robot in it as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say a live action GI robot.
Yeah, it would be.
sick.
It would be so good.
I also think that there's, like I said with Swamp Thing, I think there's a space to play in here that allows you to tell comic book stories that aren't cape stories. Like, Sergeant Rock is not a character from the comics I mean, again, my understanding of him is very limited. I've read very, 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 very little, like maybe 2 total issues for research purposes. But he's not out there fighting dragons and lizards and crazy stuff out there, from what I know. But so I wouldn't anticipate a character like him to exist within the same world, or be impactful in the same world that like Superman or Green Lantern would be. But there is a space to make comic book media that's not inherently tied to the idea of superheroism, and having a character like Sergeant Rock, on a mission to do something in World War II that is in some way impactful to future events that we know of that take place in the DC universe, but not necessarily like overly fantastical, would be really interesting, especially if that element of fantasy that's introduced to it is something like a GI robot, where it's just plausible enough that you're like, okay, it's like a dark kind of buddy cop thing, except instead of cops, they're killing Nazis. Like, cool. Plus, I'm a big fan of watching Nazis die in movies. Like, that's just me. So beam me up, Sergeant Rock. I'm all in. And like you said, the casting, the director has done some really great movies, Challengers, things like that. And the casting rumor of Jeremy Allen White is a great choice. I think his popularity is exploding. It's just one of those things that we kind of talked about a couple minutes ago, where he's really popular. He's getting a lot of recognition for things like The Bear and other stuff that he's working on. So if you want to make that movie, lock him down, get him in the studio, and let's start working on it. I know they mentioned they wanted to fast track this movie. They're happy with where the script's at. They're happy with the director. They're happy with what they have going on. So let's get him in there before you lose him, and then the next thing we know, we got some other person. That's a top tier pull.
I'm going to be a little bit greedy here because I don't know too much about Sergeant Rock. The last time I saw him was Death Metal, right? When you say World War II and you say DC Comics, my mind instantly goes to the JSA, right? I'm not sure if this is everybody else with Wildcat, and they're one of my favorite teams. So I'm like, man, would it be nice to have them all show up? Yes, but then I think it would turn more into a more standard cape movie instead of what we something a little bit more unique. So it might just not go down that path. But the best path for me, is if it was like it starts as a Sergeant Rock movie and maybe he dies like 10 minutes into the movie and then it's just like the JSA afterwards, right? And I think it'd be a great
Shut up. That's the greed they talk about in the Bible, the meme, right? No, I think it would be sick, man. Just a war movie, GI Robot, and it's just a banger from start to finish. You see what happens with Easy Company. And speaking of Easy Company, if I remember correctly, that's the name of the company in Band of Brothers. They're also Easy Company. So you have that tie in together. You see, I brought it all full circle. DC in the real world. But yeah, Sergeant Rock, I think, should happen. I think Jeremy Allen White would be awesome. Let's get it done. War stories. Good stuff. All right, let's talk about some projects that are moving forward and are going well as we're coming up on it here. Let's just rapid fire these real quick. We've got Clayface. Rumors coming that Daniel Radcliffe is going to be Basil Karlo in the film. That would be sick. I think we're all really excited for Clayface. Anna Nogueira, who is writing Supergirl, is also writing a Teen Titans script. That's really, really exciting. They want the dynamic duo film to be part of the DCU, which would tie into Teen Titans, but they're having some issues making the script work in the DCU, so it could be Elseworlds, but we're getting into more of that tomorrow. But the Teen Titans script, not done yet. We do have a script for Deathstroke Bane, which was 100% confirmed by James Gunn and Peter Safran. They're still working on Wonder Woman Paradise Lost, and Green Lanterns, not inspired by any specific Green Lantern comics. Tom King is doing like his own thing. So rapid fire, we've got Clayface, Teen Titans, Deathstroke Bane, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern. The floor is yours, gentlemen. What do you want to talk about? Pick something, talk about it for a couple minutes, and then we'll finish off here with Batman Brave and the Bold news.
So back to Swamp Thing, we were talking about it.
I think an interesting thing is to have, they must be really happy with the Supergirl script to allow her to write Supergirl and then immediately go into Teen Titans. And I think that gives me hope for the Supergirl movie, right? If they're like, oh, you rewrote this thing, you're immediately going to go. So I'm like, okay, now I'm a little bit more confident. And it's kind of funny to think that someone can just go in with a really good script for Clayface randomly and be like, oh yeah, it's one of the best scripts we've ever seen, so I guess we'll let you just make this movie.
I love it.
I assume they probably had to change, a couple of things to make it fit. But that's like an interesting thing.
I'd love to see Daniel Radcliffe get into another franchise as well. Because I'm not saying that Clayface needs to be like somebody that shows up in everything, but it would be cool to see him show up in another. He's such a great actor.
He is so underrated too.
He's regularly regulated to people understanding him as Harry Potter, but he's been a phenomenal actor since he was a little kid, and it's really going to be cool to see him play in a psychological thriller type film like what they're painting Clayface to be. So if that is truly going to end up being DC's The Fly or the equivalent of that, then I don't like I don't necessarily care so much anymore about like the marquee character as of that they're going with in these films. Like it's a Clayface movie. I'm not thinking, oh, they're making a Clayface movie. I'm thinking like they have a cool director, they have a concept, like let's go with it. I'm fine. I've seen the same superhero films since the 80s. Give me something weird and I'm ready for it.
Yeah. Christ,
Agreed.
you
You
got
got something
a
to say.
smirk. I mean,
He's got a
something
face
on
on
his mind.
He's
I'll tell
sitting
you
here-
guys. I'll tell you guys later. But yeah, I think the interesting thing too that you mentioned about what True mentioned about Supergirl, you'd figure that script would within it they'd realize, okay, the vibe you're going for, you really cover. The potential here for Teen Titans is clear, which I feel like if you look to the source material, that could give some insight onto kind of the age range of the Titans we're looking for to see like, okay, how young is Supergirl in that book? Because I figure they would go like, okay, this is capturing that spirit well, of a young adult or however old she's supposed to be, teenage character finding her way, and growing as a person. I feel like that would probably make the most sense as to why that script would be a good sign that she'd be a good fit for Titans, the writer there. But yeah, I'm super hopeful, and there seems to be a lot of signs moving forward that the Titans are going to be a priority kind of immediately, which I think makes sense. They're very unique. They don't have kind of a Marvel equivalent. As the MCU flounders its way to potentially teasing Young Avengers, which I don't think is ever going to manifest.
And I mean, take a look at the Young Avengers potential lineup compared to Teen Titans, which is like one of the most popular superhero teams, probably the third most popular behind Avengers and Justice League ever. I mean, from the cartoons.
I think it cuts. I think the Titans. I think they shine. I mean, the say what you will about Teen Titans Go, but just in terms of the marquee value, that is the longest running. Is it the longest running Cartoon Network cartoon or like DC superhero cartoon?
Yeah, I think
they
DC
recently
specifically.
Yeah, they reached that landmark. I mean, that's insane. That's insane potential for for live action stuff.
Imagine all the
forward.
kids that grew up on Teen Titans Go. Like obviously
2 generations.
I grew up
Not
on the
only
original Teen Titans,
everyone here. Well, maybe not. I feel like Nick might have grown up on their Super Friends cameos, maybe. But we grew up on the Cartoon Network Teen Titans show, and then immediately the following generation had Teen Titans Go.
Yeah.
And then potentially the next in line will have, we have Deathstroke showing up in that Bane movie, the Deathstroke and Bane movie. To me, that's clear. Like we're seeding that
like,
going
what
forward.
is that? That's gonna be
That
awesome.
sounds awesome.
That sounds pretty incredible. And so we're getting their primary villain. Not to dip our toes too much into the cartoon stuff, but Terra is being chosen as a lineup for that show, whether it's DCU canon or not. The fact that we're getting Deathstroke, Terra, a Teen Titans project, and all of this is in phase
Let's not
one.
Get too much Deathstroke and Terra, you know what I mean?
I'm just saying. I don't want it to happen.
Choo,
but
not like us, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah. That'll be his theme song. Whenever Deathstroke does some badass shit.
Hey, Slade. I heard you like
record
it.
scratch. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then the Titans just get him in like a rap circle. They just start packing him. But yeah, no, I think it's pretty clear that the Titans, teen or otherwise, are definitely an agenda for the DCU to push them forward. I mean, the first project ever, canonically, we get a Bloodhaven reference. So all that stuff is really exciting to me. And yeah, it's a good point that does actually make me even more hopeful. The fact that they're like, Supergirl looks great. Give you probably, again, I feel like the Justice League at this point, in terms of popularity, maybe, but in terms of like, are more people into the Teen Titans than the Justice League at this point at a mass scale? I would say the Titans have the league beat only because of that terrible, terrible Whedon cut. And then I feel like the Snyder hashtag kind of overshadows the movie itself, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's called Zack Snyder's Justice League, right?
Right.
And Teen
exactly.
Titans Go had a movie in the theaters, and it is pretty funny. And Zack Snyder's
There
in
you
that
go.
too, so.
Teen Titans
is.
goes pretty good.
Yeah.
Teen Titans Go to the movies.
I do actually want to ask, do you guys want them to be Teen Titans or Titans?
No, I want them to be Teen Titans. They're the Teen Titans. They're not the Titans. Okay, like that's me.
So far, we
Warner
have.
Brothers is scared to have kids beat up adults. They
Right.
don't want to see kids get hit on film. And I say you're a coward. It's 2025. Let a grown man
Kick-Ass
punch a child in the film.
Kick-Ass 1 showed it's possible.
Perfect example.
Mhm.
Exactly. No, I think we know that Kid Flash, Wally West, was in Creature Commandos. That to me says he's a teenager. I know there was a period there where right prior to Crisis, the Titans were college age. I'm the 19-year-old, Teen Titan. But to me, I think with Kid Flash, that means that they are going to be teenagers. And I would, for the sake of my goat, Nightwing, I want to see the full character arc. I want to see what it looked like with him,
transition, yeah.
beside Batman, which is, with Dynamic Duo, which I feel like we could say for the animation, but that's a weird mixture of live action. We don't know if that'll be DCU canon. He says that maybe we'll fit it in, but it might, have to change some stuff, which to me is good either way because it means they have a plan for the Robins that you would need to have that in place anyway for something even as early as this to potentially contradict it. But I want to see Dick Grayson. I want to see the full character arc. I want to see him become Nightwing in a movie. I want to see the Judas Contract, first appearance reveal. I want all that to play out. So I'd rather them be teens for sure because there's just like, and again, the MCU, we're just always going to do it. So we just shouldn't shy away. But, we've had the first Sam Wilson Captain America movie and they're like, this guy has no villains. Have him fight Red Hulk, I guess. And I don't want to see that where Damien's that got the Teen Titans, they have like 2 volumes of his team. Like, let's hedge our bets and start with the earliest and work our way up. We know we're getting Damien anyway.
Got a great rogues gallery too. I mean, you got Brother Blood, not to mention Deathstroke, who we're already getting. There's just so many that you can pull from, that are really, really strong contenders and pretty well known based on the fact that DC has done a pretty good job of pushing the Teen Titans outside of watchable live action projects, and we will not speak any further about the show.
One strike in. We got 2 more chances.
Let's wrap this up, fellas. What do we say? We talk about a little Batman. Say the best for last. You know what I mean? So, they're talking about The Brave and the Bold, and they're developing the script right now. We were talking about, so James Gunn's favorite superhero growing up was Batman, so obviously he's going to write the script, but that's not how it is going currently. There is a unnamed writer writing it, and he says he is working very, very closely with that writer on The Brave and the Bold. Additionally, Gunn said basically outright, Pattinson is not going to be the star of The Brave and the Bold. It is going to be a different actor. It's not going to be Robert Pattinson. They're not going to bring that into the DCU. So finally we can put that to rest. There are going to be the deniers out there that exist, and I hope you find help one day. But Pattinson, it's going to be a trilogy. It's not going to be related to the DCU.
Just wait for Crisis on Infinite Earths, the movie. They'll reboot it.
Up.
Pattinson will be rolled in.
Oh God.
Yeah.
It doesn't suck to lose something someone like Colin Farrell, who has put on a magnificent performance as the Penguin, and now the Penguin probably can never be used in the DCU simultaneously because, I mean, come on. What are you You just can't. That sucks a little bit, but to be honest, I was like kind of hyped for the Joker. I've pretty much cooled on the Joker. I don't like the way he looks at all in the Batman universe, and I want a really comic book accurate one. But anyway, Brave and the Bold, we got an update, and they are still going with Andy Muschietti, who will be directing it. He's the first one that's going to see the script, unless he reads it and he's like, ugh, this sucks. But there's no chance in hell he'll do that. He directed The Flash. So, guys, Batman, Brave and the Bold, it's happening, and we've got some updates. That's good. I mean, one part of the Trinity's got a movie coming out. Another one has a script, and
the third we'll talk about tomorrow. But
yeah. How are we feeling? Are we?
What do you think, Nick?
Are we glad Andy's still on it? Got script updates.
You're deferring to me.
Well, I saw the look on your face this time. I'm curious.
It's because like I'm
saw
optimistic.
It chapter 2. Yeah.
I'm optimistic with James Gunn overseeing everything that we won't get The Flash. And I think that one of the things that people have to realize about The Flash is that it was a byproduct of a lot of the same things that have gone wrong with previous DC, specifically Warner Brothers properties. And it is that it just reeked of managerial oversight, where too many cooks were in the kitchen saying, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this kind of thing. And it turned out to be just a piece of slop. So is Andy Muschietti a bad director? I don't think so. I mean, I loved the It movies that he made. I thought those were great. I think if you let him cook, he could do a great job. Is he my first pick to do this, though? Probably not. But I'm assuming that with oversight from James, whoever the unnamed writer is, which could potentially be a comic book writer, which I feel like if they... I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to tell you something I think is going to sound insane. I think Scott Snyder's
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah.
Wow.
So I think Scott Snyder's working on it because he's been directly confronted on Twitter about some things that he's working on. And whenever people ask him about his involvement in the DCU, he's been crazy coy. I think Scott Snyder is writing the script and is penning the works. Now, for those of you who don't know, and if you've been living under a comic book rock, Scott Snyder has been predominantly a Batman writer for the last 15 years. Ever since the New 52 launched in 2011.
Since before that with Dick Grayson.
I know he wrote Batman Detective Comics, a couple issues of that, which was his first run. But his main piece of
what he's known for,
his main what he's known for is his New 52 run, which started there. By the way, I'm going to be honest with you. Sidebar? Those Detective Comics runs, the Black Mirror, those are the best things that he's written. They're insanely good. With Jim Gordon's son. If you get a chance, go read them. I'm coming back. If he is involved in writing this, with James allowed to kind of mold what he writes into a script that will fit into a confined 2 hour and 20-minute runtime, it don't matter who you have directing that thing. It's gonna be gold. You know, I'm more concerned.
That's almost so good that it's scary. Like I'm actually, that prospect scares me. It's if Scott Snyder wrote a Batman movie, because Marvel, and that's actually an interesting springboard, because there's that Rob Liefeld news where he's like, they screwed me over. They don't care about comic writers. If you had Tom King and Scott Snyder both involved with the DCU, like properly hands-on, we're writing motion pictures. That makes it, I mean, that raises the tide of the whole company, because then you're going to have more good talent coming to the comics being like, okay, we can actually, potentially transition into motion picture.
Screenwriter.
Whereas with Marvel, ain't no way in hell. If you're a show writer, maybe they'll give you a comic, not the other way around. Hell no, at Marvel.
And just to kind of circle back to something you brought up a second ago, Rob Liefeld isn't a great author at all. So like he was bummed that he wasn't invited to an after party, and he went through a temper tantrum on Twitter. Like these guys, Tom Taylor, Tom King. Sorry, I'm sick. I'm doing my best. And Scott Snyder are some of the most I mean, they are first and foremost, they are authors, they are writers. You know, Rob Liefeld's known as an artist, right? Primarily.
No,
So who can't draw
And
feet?
artist.
you
And
did. Yeah. The air
he's like artist, crybaby bitch online, and then he's a writer under that. But when it comes
Shots
to the
fired.
idea, I
Rob,
think
I
the
love
reason,
you.
the only reason that they, I wouldn't say that either, Garrick. We'll talk. But uh,
I'm
I think the
lukewarm
only
on him.
reason they wouldn't announce that right now is because they know that like that is going to be once they start pulling things together and they're ready to announce more about the film, like who's the casting, who's the official director. That's when they're going to hit you with oh, by the way, it's written by
Scott Snyder.
And
Now,
people are going to go,
man.
Oh,
what?
Yeah,
Like, you know,
part of
it's gonna-
chase
that.
out your news. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that's big, and it might also have to do with he wants the absolute, Batman to kind of be like the centerpiece of what he's working on
right now.
Yeah,
for
so
sure.
I feel like a movie would immediately overshadow that, and probably also
would.
confuse people because it's like he's rebooting Batman. Those are like the headlines that you might read with absolute, and I feel like they'll get some wires crossed there. But what you said also that makes a lot of sense. But man, I hadn't heard rumor of that. That's actually news to me that if he has been dodgy about DCU questions.
and if you were gonna
No,
do
that's
like a
scary.
Damian and Bruce story, like that's what he was writing when he was
Yep.
writing. Like Damian was Robin when he started writing, not only for Dick but for Bruce as well. And you could just go, like we have an established Batman. You just go Court of Owls like off the jump, off rip. Like that would be a great way to just jump into the Batman mythos. It's like we
What
all
if,
know
bro?
Batman, right?
What if it starts just like his Court of Owls start? Batman and Nightwing beating up the entire Rogues Gallery in Arkham Asylum. If because we know we're getting the whole Bat family
Right.
at this point, and thinking about how did Scott Snyder use the extended Bat family characters? It was honestly sparingly.
It was.
But there could be some good impactful moments like that if you just want to off the rip hit the ground running. Here's the entire Rogues Gallery. Here's who's going to play them for the subsequent movies. No, yeah, that would be
that
crazy.
would be a
And
mic
then
drop moment for sure.
Court of Owls, because people have wanted that. People wanted Batfleck to do that.
Yeah.
That was a big thing. People are like, why not just start? It's one of his most iconic stories in recent memories. It also would serve as a good jumping on point because most people, they're like Batman Year One or New 52 Scott Snyder Batman. Those are the two jumping on points that most people will give. So no,
And I think the
that's
other
crazy.
thing that's really interesting about the Court of Owls story, if you've never read it, is that we have 6 full feature-length Batman films now. How many do we have? 7?
Batman
Yeah,
66 the movie.
We have 9.
9? I'm sorry, I don't even know how many. Anyway, regardless,
No, we
but
have
almost
10 if
all,
you count Phantasm. Pretty sure.
almost all of
Right,
them
that
focus
was-
on
yeah.
Batman versus 1 or 2 specific fantastical villains for the most part, with the exception of like the modern Batman, which is more of a psychological thriller kind of a thing. Even in The Dark Knight, there's him versus Ra's, him versus Joker, him versus Bane. There's kind of one specific guy. The idea behind Court of Owls is that it's Batman versus like him. He's not quite as plugged in as he thought he was. He finds out effectively that like there's this whole shadowy cabal that knows Gotham way more than he does and has controlled everything,
Yeah.
throughout his whole life. I think it would just paint a really interesting, like, coming into this these films, that Batman has already existed. He exists for a while and he's accomplished quite a lot. He's gone through a Robin. His son is Robin now. He's already beat the shit out of guys like Dr. Phosphorus, who is a tremendously powerful villain. So we know he has the chops, but we don't know, what do we do? Do we have him fight Man-Bat now? Do we have him fight Mr. Freeze on screen again? No, give him like a
Yes.
shadowy cabal. Give him a shadowy cabal of people. Lock him in a maze underground in the dark. Get him high on bath salts that come out of an owl fountain, and then have him fight zombies. That's what we want to see.
I have two points on that. One of them is positive, one of them is negative. I'll start with the negative one is there's been some murmurs, although I don't even know if Matt Reeves knows what is going to happen in Batman 2 yet, but the stuff that he's been teasing kind of points in Court of Owls territory, and that, especially the first movie has a lot of that same DNA where he's skulking around in caverns and learning that, the political history of Gotham is not what it seems. So
Batman is not known for skulking in caverns, though.
I'm sorry, my bad. It was very out of character. I didn't write the movie. Maybe they'll patch that for the sequel. There'll be no cavern skulking.
But I was known for trifling with villains.
Oh right, yeah, that's a good one. But yeah, no. So maybe they'll restructure it. The Batman 2 is such a confusing quagmire at this point, as far as he pitched it to James Gunn, but he hasn't written the full thing, like what's going on. But a positive thing, though, is Court of Owls was written in the context of a reboot, but it also acknowledged there is still all this continuity in history. And I think in the way where you're saying well, let's incorporate that history into the movie and say, like, he's already gone through all these things. But also moviegoers know how badass Batman is. We've had all these iterations. So in the same way that a comic reader will go, well, I've read he's fucking done everything. He just got done beating the Black Glove, over in the Morrison things, pre-retcon. Morrison had built him into this, he's the uber crime fighter. If he was a real guy and he went through all this, he'd be impossibly, adept.
Psychologically damaged, yeah.
Yeah, that as well. But I think in the same way, a movie version of that same story could be like, what the core is something maybe even beyond the Nolan verse, League of Shadows, if they could even just draw those parallels outright, And I like when they do that. I like, the idea that with these DC characters especially, everything's kind of nebulously happened, So especially since with Damian being in the movie, the court or the League of Assassins or Shadows or whatever that we're all gonna most recall is gonna be the Nolan movie. So I think it'd be pretty cool. They're flying or whatever, or they're doing some detective work, and Damian's like, what are this court thing, like, how good are they? And he's like, well, I beat your granddad's ass, when he tried fucking bombing the city, so it's not gonna be that big a deal. And then he just gets hit by a right cross from Talon. Yeah, no, I think that would be awesome. And if it is Scott Snyder, because even just thinking like that sequence, one of the most memorable comic reading moments for me was sitting on a car ride reading Court of Owls. You flip the book around physically, and then by the end of it, you're disoriented. You're like, am I holding the thing up the right way? Seeing that done cinematically, how could Scott Snyder, play with the camera, or, Muschieti, how could he make the audience so disoriented themselves to be in Batman's shoes? I think getting that in a movie, whether it's Batman 2 or Brave and the Bold, that's super exciting.
Nick has lit a fire under Crisis, ladies and gentlemen, and we could not be more excited for Batman, at least the two of us here at the top. The two at the bottom, one's excited for Superman, the other, his favorite characters, and never getting another project in his lifetime. But we will talk about that more tomorrow. Before we end,
actually, my favorite superhero is getting a movie in July.
I know, that's what I said.
For months
yeah. True's the one that's never getting another project. But we'll talk about that tomorrow.
I thought you were saying.
No. You're the Superman guy. True's the Wonder Woman guy. Yeah. If I flip through your backgrounds here, I mean, Nick's got all the Superman stuff around him. You go to True, boom, Wonder Woman and Detective Chimp, of course, because
we might have to replace it with like headstones and like all the time Wonder Woman's lost, and, like in mourning. Yeah.
An in memorandum set to Arms of an Angel by Sarah McLachlan.
Every time goes to True's face cam. All right, finish off. James Gunn has a hidden project. This is what he's most excited for. We're not going to talk about it in any detail. We're going to each give a guess, And that's going to be the end of the podcast, unless there are any super chats. Let me check. No super chats. So we will end after that. Crisis, hidden project, James Gunn, most excited for, what is it?
Live action Super Pets and or Rocket Raccoon, Crypto the Super Dog crossover movie.
Nick?
So I think there's only two plausible explanations. First is that there would be a solo Katana movie where her sword traps the souls of her victims.
Yeah.
The other one, and the one that I'm hoping it is, if it would be grand in scale, would be a New Gods film.
Ooh.
Okay. True.
I actually legitimately had no idea. I feel like the only one that's missing is Flash.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we've had except for that one kid Flash thing, we've had nothing else with Flash. So.
Aquaman. He's MIA.
Like I was saying, Flash, right? No. But yes, it's one of. I don't think it's to be Aquaman. I just don't know if he's. Man, I love Aquaman.
About that.
Yeah, I
The
feel like
hidden
I'm
project is not coming out for many, many years, but it is something that needs many, many years to come to fruition.
Oh.
And it is an official MCU DCU crossover that we will be getting at some point.
Yeah,
in the future.
I thought about that. Be terrible, but
that's
yeah,
never gonna happen. It's never gonna happen.
It's never gonna happen.
Definitely not it. So do not listen to me.
No. Unless you bring back Phase 1 Avengers, because that's what we want to see, right?
Robert Downey Jr. 70 coming in, still doing it.
I am Iron Man.
I mean,
Can't snap.
Authorizes.
Where's Pepper?
Selling goop.
Friday. Clip that. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching this episode of the DCU podcast. It was a fun one. We talked all about the amazing DCU as we do every week. This week has been just absolutely crazy. Cannot wait till tomorrow. We will be back for a special part 2 to talk all animated stuff and the death of Wonder Woman in the DCU. She's never getting another project. It's over. Or at least
over.
The Wonder
it's never
Woman,
been more over.
The Wonder Woman fans, like True on Twitter, will tell you she's the most hated character. Warner Brothers is misogynistic. They'll never make another thing. They hate her. They want her to
King's
be
ruining her on purpose, so she'll never get.
They're trying to replace her with Harley Quinn. It's done. We'll talk about all that and more tomorrow. Again, thank you to GamerSubs for sponsoring this podcast. Head to gamersubs.gg/key issues. Get 10% off your next order. Thanks to everybody who stopped by. Leave us a like if you like and subscribe if you like what you see. You can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, literally anywhere you get your podcast, Amazon. We're on everything, baby. We're worldwide. We're taking over globally. The DCU Experience. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Love you.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.